I took a break from some of my normal projects to do a little bit of workshop organization. I have this corner of my workbench where I keep my computer that was really cluttery. I got one of these hydraulic monitor arms. It's actually really nice and helps get the monitor up off of the workbench, but I still had my computer and a bunch of other stuff just cluttering it up. So the first step was to get the computer off the desk. I found this nice, really inexpensive computer mount on Amazon that allowed me to mount the whole computer underneath the workbench, so that freed up quite a bit of space on top. But I still have a lot of these other little accessories like the remote controls for the lights, some of my extra camera gear that I use to charge off the computer, and just, other little things like that that always end up migrating towards the computer. I thought about doing some kind of drawer underneath the workbench, but I decided to go with a rolling cabinet instead, so I started looking online to see if I could find something that might work. I ended up getting this Helmer cabinet from Ikea. It was $40 and it's this all metal little rolling cabinet meant for, the office, and it's about 11 inches wide and should fit perfectly underneath my workbenches. I'm going to end up raising it up a little bit so it's a bit taller, but I like that it had these 6 metal pull-out drawers, so there's a good amount of storage underneath of it, and if I put this on casters, I can easily store it under the bench, pull it out, use it kind of as a auxiliary little work table, something like that. The first step to any IKEA furniture, of course, is putting it together, and this one's relatively straightforward. I'm not going to go into, the step-by-step of putting together IKEA, but this one was really interesting because everything just kind of bends into place, which I thought was really interesting. There's almost no fasteners to this whole thing. You actually just bend all these tabs, and that's what holds it together. I'm probably going to end up reinforcing this a little bit later, but I actually thought it was kind of a little ingenious way that the whole thing just goes together without any tools. So here it is in the stock form, all put together. It's really not too bad. It's a little wobbly, and I'm actually going to go and put some screws on the inside and fix that up. It's really not that bad. It's relatively heavy, but it is pretty thin metal. The drawers line up nice, and they open and close pretty easily, so that's fine. So I'm going to go and replace these cute little casters on the bottom. I think these are maybe 1-inch casters, if that, and it only moves forward and backward. I want a little bit more mobility to that. So I'm going to add some MDF probably to the top and the bottom, and that's going to actually help it quite a bit because there's not much frame strength in the bottom, so having a big piece of MDF in the bottom screwed into the frame is going to help that out quite a bit. Then do some drawer inserts, a couple other things. So let's get this thing hot rodded a bit. I'm using 1/2-inch MDF for both the top and the bottom. I got a 24-inch by 24-inch sheet of it at Home Depot for like $5, so it's relatively inexpensive. I'm cutting this down on the table saw. I'm actually cutting the width first, which is 11 inches, and then I go back and cut the depth, which is something like 16.5 inches after that. And this is actually my very first cut on the table saw. I got it a couple weeks back and just really haven't had a chance to use it, so this project was a great excuse to break out the new table saw. To install the casters and the MDF on the bottom of the cabinet, I flipped it over, removed the cute little casters, and I just used the existing holes on the bottom to screw the MDF into. I did, I think, a total of like 8 screws across the bottom, and there's even a couple of holes on the bottom of the cabinet that were unused, so I went ahead and used those to screw into the MDF, and then after I screwed into that, then I just screwed the casters onto the bottom of that. In addition, the back panel just kind of bends into place. There's a couple little tabs at the bottom and a couple little tabs at the top that are used to hold that in place, but there were a couple existing screw holes through that piece. So I just marked where those screw holes were, drilled out a couple holes, and then put a couple screws in there. And of course, pro tip, if you're going to be drilling holes into metal, don't brush away the chips with your finger. You will cut your finger, as I did, and I often do when I forget that I'm dealing with steel. So yeah, I cut my finger on that, but no big deal. And adding those 2 extra screws actually increased the rigidity of the cabinet quite a bit. So yeah, putting the bottom on was pretty straightforward. I've got the piece of MDF attached to the bottom, and I've got the casters on there. And as you can see, it's a lot more mobile and a lot more free moving than it was before. It does help out with the structural integrity a little bit. These side panels and then this front and back piece are completely separate and they're just kind of pressed together. So having them all screwed together does help out quite a bit. The next thing I did was kind of fix this slight issue with these drawers. You see that if you kind of move it around aggressively, they kind of pop out, but this one does not. This one has just a little stack of magnets on the back so that when you actually put this in and close it, it just kind of grabs just enough across the back to where it actually kind of closes and stays shut. When I first built this, I was just kind of sliding around on the casters, checking it out, and all the drawers were just kind of popping out randomly because there's really nothing to hold them closed. So I put a stack of magnets across the back of all of these drawers so that they'll stay at least flush when I move it around. So next step is to get the top attached. Once I removed the top of the cabinet, I just lined it up with the piece of MDF and then clamped the two together so they wouldn't slide around. And then I just used a small drill bit to drill 5 holes across the top that drilled through the metal and the MDF, making sure I didn't go through all the way through the MDF. And then I just used some sheet metal screws to connect the two. Really nothing crazy here. Of course, I didn't pay attention to which was the good side of the MDF, so I ended up having the top as the nasty side of the MDF. So after the whole thing was together, I had to get out the random orbit sander and sand it down to get rid of all the scuffs and the sticker residue. Here it is with the MDF top now attached. It's starting to look a lot better and it feels a lot sturdier. Just the added weight of the casters, the bottom MDF and the top MDF makes it feel a lot more sound and makes it feel a lot better. And I have it next to my CNC rolling cabinet over here, and you can see that color-wise they're actually a pretty close match, which is nice, so it does kind of match everything else I have in the shop. I was originally planning on using one of these, but unfortunately they're just too tall. With the casters and everything, my workbench comes out to about here, so I'd need to raise all 4 of my workbenches up about 8 inches if this needed to slide under, and it's also just a lot bigger, so I kind of like the small form factor of this. I still have a couple more modifications that I want to do, and I'll show you what's wrong with these drawers. To prevent the drawers from pulling all the way out like this, you have these tabs on either side, and you're supposed to fold out these tabs, and when you pull out the drawer, they hit against the frame and prevent the drawer from coming all the way out. And I have it done on this top one, and as you can see, it works perfectly fine. The problem is we're losing about this much of the drawer. If I pull out this little organizer, you can see that this whole compartment isn't even visible or usable with those tabs. So I'm going to make a small modification to those tabs, or actually just not use those tabs and make another modification so that you can use more of the drawer's depth. I found that using some sheet metal screws screwed into the inside of the drawers sticking out accomplished the same goal as the tabs, and then I could position them a little bit further back than the tabs. So I just measured 1.5 inches from the back of the drawer, drilled some holes, and then screwed the sheet metal screws from the inside, but not all the way, so that when I put them inside the cabinet, I can finish putting them in all the way, and it served as an effective stop. So I kind of played around with the spacing a little bit and found that the 1.5 inches worked out well. So I did this for all the drawers, and then it was just a matter of putting them back inside the cabinet, and as soon as they were inside the cabinet, I screwed them in all the way, and that seemed to work out pretty well. The final thing I wanted to do for this cabinet was to find a better way to organize the stuff that was going to be inside each drawer. Because they're relatively good sized drawers and I have a lot of little things, I wanted some sort of organizer. So I looked around Ikea and this was the closest thing that I could come up with. There was nothing specifically made for this cabinet and it's not really a standard size. These are almost perfect. They're the right depth, but if you look at the width, it's about 1/4 inch too big, which is really frustrating. So what I did is I took these, brought them over to the table saw, set up my rip fence so I could cut off one side of the lip, and then flipped it around and cut off the other side of the lip. And now they fit in there nice and snug. So it's really a perfect fit and a great way to organize the little parts inside of here. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this little project came out. I think the total came out to around maybe $75. 20 or 25 of that was due to the casters, but having a good quality set of casters is definitely worth the money. The cabinet itself is about 40 bucks, so that's not too bad. And there is quite a bit of storage in here. I've got all my remotes, tape measures, flashlights, things like that. So it's really nice to have all of those off of the desk. And I do have another little work surface here that I could use, and the thing just kind of tucks underneath the desk like that. So it's really invaluable to have all of this space completely freed up and not have all the clutter on top of here. So hopefully this will make other projects a little bit more efficient. And so I need to get back to doing that. So see you next time.